Oh, sorry we were late. We had a little bobcat in a tree today. And once Tyler scaled up the tree and got the cat out, we were able to come back into the sanctuary and make things happen. No, I'm just kidding. That didn't really take place. I just want to see if anybody's listening today. On a serious note, we have, I believe, just a few weeks left here in our Leviticus series, and wanted to know where we should go from here. I'm pretty flexible. When I originally set out to do Wednesday mornings, we were seeing probably on an average 10, maybe upwards towards 15, sometimes as low as 7 people come out on Wednesday mornings at 10:30 to support the midweek morning. And now it's pretty much just Tyler and I. And so we wanted to see whether this is being watched. Are you streaming this? I understand Leviticus at times isn't like the most exciting portion of the Bible, though I think it's been really a good study. And so we can take a break, or we can, after we get done with Leviticus, we can discontinue this altogether. Again, if it's just myself and a few of you by way of live stream, not that you're not important, but we may want to rethink where we're putting our energy. And so let me know. Comment in the section below that you are watching or listening or viewing and you'd like us to continue. I don't mind doing it. It gives me something on my schedule to look forward to each week. But with that being said, I want to make sure it's beneficial to you and to those that are in our church family, and also for those that are in our church virtual family. Maybe you're watching from a few states away, and if this is a help to you, let's keep going. If nobody replies, I think I'm going to lean towards discontinuing our midweek morning. Maybe then bring it back next fall, give folks a little bit of a break, and then when we get back into school, launch it and see if there's any more interest in physical gathering. I think that's so important if you're able to do that. We do have Wednesday night electives, so I'm kind of doing double duty on Wednesdays, which again, I don't mind. I just want to see if it's the best use of time. Okay, so here we are. We're in Leviticus chapter 25. And this is kind of a neat passage because it talks about special and unique Sabbaths and Jubilees. And so we're going to dive right in. A lot of verses today, a lot of verses. So I'm going to read, make a few means of commentary, and then move right on to the next verse. Verses 1 and 2, and the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the children of Israel. We see this as a reoccurring pattern. And say to them, Moses to the children of Israel, when you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. Here we see these laws were given in faith. Israel was still in the promised land during this time. They had not reached, or they were still in the wilderness, They had not reached the promised land yet. Additionally, as far as Moses and the people knew, they were only a matter of months from entering in. So God speaks to them on the Mount Sinai. This reminds us that Israel was still camped at Mount Sinai. This is the very place that Moses received the laws from God as he met with the Lord on the mountain. Israel remained at the Mount Sinai from the time of the Exodus 19, or from the time of Exodus chapter 19, all through Leviticus and up through Numbers 10. And then here it says, the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. We are familiar with the idea of the Sabbath of the days, where one day out of the 7 is specifically dedicated to God and to rest. This described a Sabbath of years for the land, where the land received a rest of 1 year out of 7. This was mentioned before, if you recall back in Exodus chapter 23. Then the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. Obviously, this obviously called Israel to truly trust God. They had to trust God that he would provide enough within the harvest of 6 years, because here on the 7th year, they're giving the land to rest. So they'd have to have enough. They'd have to plan ahead. They'd have to think ahead. They'd have to put up in storage. They'd provide enough in the 6 years of harvest to see them through the 7th year. Let's look at verses 3 through 7. 6 years you shall sow your field. In 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, gather its fruit. But the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. What grows on its own accord in your harvest shall not reap, nor gather grapes of your untended vine, for it is the year of rest for the land. And the Sabbath produced of the land shall be food for you. For you, your male and your female servants, your hired men, and the stranger who dwells with you. For your livestock and the beasts that are in your land. All its produce shall be for food. In the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land. This applied both to the grain crops and the fruit-bearing plants. Israel was to do this as a radical demonstration that the land belonged to God, not to them. So a very, very repeating reminder. And the Sabbath produced the land shall be food for you. Observing the Sabbath year is also a powerful testimony of the dependence on God. Israel declared their belief that God would meet their needs. They were truly living by faith, but this was also wise management of the land. And even today, I grew up on a farm. My dad would rotate crops, and some years he would even give that land or that soil rest. Israel's failure to keep this command determined the length of their captivity. And so there was consequences in their disobedience. Leviticus Chapter 26 and verse 34 said that if Israel was not obedient, God would make sure the land gets its Sabbath by removing the people to the land of an enemy. And so, again, we see the importance of the Sabbath of the land. And then 18 through 22. And ye shall count 7 Sabbaths of the years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. So you'd come up to 49. If you continue to read this passage of Scripture, you will find that there should be a consecrated year every 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout all the land of its inhabitants. And it shall be a jubilee for you. And each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family, that the 50th year shall be a jubilee to you. In it you shall neither nor sow nor reap what grows of its own accord, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine, for it is the jubilee, and it shall be holy to you. You shall eat its produce from the field. You should count 7 Sabbaths of the years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. The year of Jubilee was something like, if you're doing the math, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, all the way up to get to 49. Year 49 would be a Sabbath. You are correct. But year 50 would be a Sabbath as well. This would be like a double Sabbath year in the sense that the crops were not planted. The land was given to rest for 2 years. 2 years in succession would have been a severe test of faith. The Israelites were called upon to trust God totally, acknowledging him in a profound way, that he was the provider of the basic necessities of life. Some take the prophecy of Isaiah 61, 1 through 3 to speak of a Jubilee year. Since Jesus read this passage in Nazareth synagogue at the beginning of his ministry, some have speculated Jesus' ministry began in Jubilee. On the 10th day of the 7th month, it is worthy of remark that the Jubilee was not promised or proclaimed, till the 10th day of the 7th month, on the very day when the great annual atonement was made for the sins of people. Proclaim liberty throughout the land and all its inhabitants. The wonderful liberty of Jubilee was joyfully announced through all the land. What else happened in the year 50 was all the slaves were now free. And we see some of these laws explained in Exodus. In the year of Jubilee, moreover, the slave was liberated, thus reminding men that they could have no absolute and a final authority in any human being. The verses continue to say each of those would return to his own possession, each would return to his own family. And so we see that taking place as well. How about verses 13 through 17? In the year of Jubilee, the land went back to its original family. In this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to his possession. And if you sell anything to your neighbor or buy from your neighbor's land, you shall not oppress one another. According to the number of years after Jubilee, you shall buy from your neighbor, and according to the number of the years of crops, he shall sell to you. According to the multitude of years, you shall increase its price. According to the fewer number of the years, you shall diminish its price. For if he sells to you according to the number of the years of the crops, therefore you shall not oppress one another. Again, in this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return his possession. You're not to oppress one another, but there should be a returning of what you had acquired. Verses 18 through 22, God's provision for the Sabbath year. It says, so shall you observe my statutes, keep my judgments, perform them, and you will dwell in this land in safety. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat the fruit and dwell there in safety. And if I say, what shall you eat in the 7th year, since we shall not sow nor gather in our produce, then I will command my blessing upon you in the 6th year, and it shall bring forth produce enough for, catch this, 3 years. And you shall sow in the 8th year and eat the produce until the 9th year, until the produce comes in, ye shall eat of the harvest. So in the 6th year, it is promised by God that they would have enough produce for not only that year or the next year, but 3 years in total. They would be eating the produce of the 6th year, some of that produce up to 3 years later. Why? Because God commanded his blessing upon you in the 6th year. If Israel trusted God to provide as much as he promised in the 6th year, to provide for the 3 years to follow, God promised to command a blessing upon that command. The promise was to be sure that God would do as he commanded he would. How about verse 23? Rules regarding the redemption of property. Verse 23 says, the land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine. You are strangers and sojourners with me, for the land is mine. The whole earth is the Lord, Psalm 24:1. Yet God has a special regard for the land of Israel, which he calls his holy land, Zechariah 2:12. Here God proclaims that the land of Israel is his in a special way beyond the sense in which all the earth belongs to him. The land should not be sold permanently because the promised land belonged to God in some special sense. The land could not be leased. Could be leased, but it could never be sold. Every lease would expire in the year of Jubilee. In addition, the lease could be brought out at any time by a kinsman redeemer. Leviticus 25. For your strangers and sojourners with me, one could say that the promised land never truly belonged to Israel. It belonged to God. How about verses 24 through 28, the role of redeeming a relative? And all the land in your possession you shall grant to the redemption of land. If one of your brethren becomes sore and he has sold some of his possession, and if his redeeming relative comes to redeem it, then he may redeem what his brother sold. Or if a man has no one to redeem it, but he himself becomes able to redeem it, then let him count the years since its sale and restore the remainder to the man or the woman who sold it, that he may return to his possession. But if he is not able to have restored it to himself, then what was sold shall remain in the hand of him who bought it until the year of Jubilee. And in the Jubilee it shall be released, and he shall return to his possession. So if I understand this correctly, you could have a redeeming relative come by and take that land. If it got sold outside of the family, it would not be sold permanently. It would be sold temporarily. Let's just say it was sold in year number 3. Okay, 3 years prior, you had the year of Jubilee. Now you're in the new reset, if you will, year 3. You sold it. That land would be really leased because it was not permanently purchased, but it was purchased nevertheless throughout the next 47 years. Then that land would be given back to its original owner. It would be a bit of a reset. Or it could be sold or go through the transfer of the kinsman redeemer. Let him count the years since its sale and restore the remainder. This would be the redeeming relative could purchase that land on behalf of the family. The price was determined by how many years stood since its sale until the next Jubilee. Perhaps he would pay back to the buyer the money he had received minus the amount of the purchaser had earned from the land since the sale. The value of the property would decrease the closer they were to the next Jubilee. The exception for land in walled cities. If a man sells a house in a walled city, then he may redeem it within a whole year after it's sold. Within a full year he may redeem it. But if it's not redeemed within the space of a full year, then the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to him who bought it throughout his generations. It shall not be released in the Jubilee. However, the houses and villages which have no wall around them shall be counted as fields of the country. They may be redeemed, and they shall be released in Jubilee. Nevertheless, the cities of the Levites and the houses and the cities of their possession, Levites may redeem them at any time. And if a man purchases a home from the Levites, then the house that was sold in the city of possession shall be released in Jubilee. For the houses and the cities of the Levites are their possession among the children of Israel. But the field of the common land of their cities may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession. So basically, if a man sells a house in the walled city, he may redeem it within the year after it's sold. The laws of the property described in the previous verses do not apply to urban property, or what is described here in the text, in a walled city. Those that were outside of the walled city were considered the country. If a man purchases a house from the Levites, then that house was sold in the city of the possession, it shall be released in Jubilee. However, there was an exception to the special rules regarding urban real estate. The property of the Levites would be theirs forever, redeemable at any time in a city or a rural area. How about the care for the poor, the lending to the poor? If one of your brethren becomes poor, falls in the poverty among you, you shall help him like a stranger or the sojourner, that he may live with you. Take no usury or interest from him, but fear your God, that your brother may live with you. You shall not lend him money for usury, nor lend him for food at the profit. I'm the Lord God, brought you out of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. This basically gives parameters and boundaries and direction on the prohibiting of the making of money from a misfortune of a poor brother. Instead of making profit from the misery of the poor brother, the command was simple. You should help him. Take no usury or interest from him, but fear God, that your brother may live with you. Take him in, put your trust in the Lord, and as you put your trust in the Lord, not only will he provide for you, but he also provide for those that you take in. And then he reminds us of this. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan. God's kindness and generosity to Israel were an example and a type of kindness and generosity to those that we should show to others. When a Hebrew becomes a slave because of debt, if one of your brethren who dwells by you becomes poor and sells himself to you, you shall not compel him to serve as a slave. What's that mean? It was normal in the ancient world for someone in life-threatening poverty or unable to pay their debts to become a slave. The law of Moses would not allow an Israelite to do this for one of his brethren. He was not to be regarded as a slave, but as a hired servant. Notice the distinction there. Slave pictures that subordination, where servant gives a different definition. He shall serve you until the year of Jubilee. So here he is, this hired servant, not a slave or a sojourner, could not be released from his obligation when his debt was paid. But every hired servant, sojourner, was released at the year of Jubilee. Ye shall not rule over him with rigor, but you shall fear God. This tells about the temperament. As for your male and female slaves, whom you have from the nations that are around you, from them you may buy male and female slaves. Foreign slaves from debt or poverty did not have the same rights as Israelites who went into servitude as a debt. And then we're finishing out here, verses 47 through 55, redeeming a Hebrew slave from a foreigner. Just give you a quick synopsis on this. He sells himself to a stranger or a sojourner. This deals with an Israelite man forced to sell himself to a foreigner who may not respect his laws under God's law. And he is sold, he may be redeemed again. As in the redemption of land, the kinsman redeemer was responsible to buy the Hebrew slave out of the servitude. If he could, the price was reckoned in relationship, it was calculated in relationship to the year of Jubilee. If he could not be redeemed earlier, then he too was released in the year of Jubilee. The children of Israel are servants to me. God's care for Israel and their redemption was based on the idea that they were first servants to the Lord, honoring their covenant to the Lord. So what's the takeaways from today? Let's conclude. One is, we see the importance of God's rest. Every seventh day, we are to rest. We see in the Old Testament the principle of the Sabbath, not only being applied to the week, but being applied to the calculated years. 6 years they would work. On the seventh, on the seventh, they would go ahead and give the land a rest. And so I just want to see the principle of God, how he operates systematically and correctly. And, I trust that we will still honor the Sabbath and that we will look at the Sabbath. We find our rest, our spiritual rest in the Lord. And as we find our spiritual rest in the Lord, that we will honor him and that he will replenish us. Our dependency and our trust will always be found in God. And I hope that's a challenge to you today. Leviticus chapter 25. We'll continue next week, Lord willing. Stay tuned for any announcements pertaining to Wednesday night programming, and we will go from there. Actually, I just got a text. There will be no Wednesday activities. All right, so we'll plan to see you on Sunday. Let's stay connected.